Water Center with participants, board member participants on Zoom and being live streamed on YouTube. First item on the agenda is introductions and attendance. Do we need a roll call, or are we just going to have that staff do that, Brian?
I was going to have Jennifer do a roll call of committee members and then note the other board members that are present.
Okay, could we have that, please, Jennifer?
Absolutely. Chairman Raybould?
Here.
Ms. Cole-Hansen? Here. Mr. Olmstead?
Here.
Mr. Stevenson?
Here.
Mr. Barker?
Here.
Mr. Gibbs?
I'm
Mr.
here.
Gibbs? Thank
I'm
you.
here. Couldn't get
Mr.
unmuted.
No worries. Mr. McMahon?
Here.
And Mr. Vanstone? Don't see him.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. Next item on the agenda, Idaho Water Resource Board Recharge Water Right Non-Diversion Agreement. Mr. Patton.
Yes, as you're aware, we've been working on what a potential non-diversion agreement might look like to effectuate a wintertime bypass of certain flows at Milner Dam during the recharge season. And Rybar with the Attorney General's office is here to walk through what that potential agreement might look like, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, welcome, Ann.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. So I am here today to walk you through a draft agreement that I have been working on with Idaho Power Company's Council. This is for your consideration and edits. So I'm just going to walk through what we've put together, highlight some of the main ideas and themes. So the recitals and preambles are pretty basic. They note that the board holds recharge water rights 017142 and 01-10609, and it is those two water rights that are the subject of this agreement not to divert. It goes through some of the background in terms of adoption of the ESPA camp, the overall long-term goal of 600,000 acre feet of change in the aquifer budget, the phase one of the camp, and all of those goals having been reached, the change in goal of average annual to 250,000 in 2016, and the opportunity to raise that goal to 350,000. It also notes that the policy or the idea that the managed recharge goal should be achieved while also addressing in-river flow needs, including hydropower. So those recitals are just meant to kind of set up the background and reasons for the agreement. Getting into the body of the agreement, you'll see paragraph 1 there on page 2. The agreement is intended to start November 1st of this year. And will continue for a term of 5 years after that. That 5 years would automatically renew for successive 5-year terms unless one or the other party provides 30 days prior written notice prior to the end of the term. In the second paragraph, it discusses Senate Concurrent Resolution 110, which directed the board to increase the managed recharge goal to 350,000 acre feet on an average annual basis. That average annual basis we've defined there as the board's recharge average, and that then becomes kind of a term of art throughout the rest of the agreement. That board's recharge average is defined to be based on a 15-year rolling average. And that would begin with water year 2016 And then would be based on the water year in terms of October 1st to September 30th. The third paragraph just is a statement that the board and Idaho Power Company agree to support the change in the board's recharge average from 250 to 350. And then in paragraph 4, we start to get into the meat of the agreement not to divert. So the board is agreeing not to divert a portion of the water available under water rights 1-7142 and 1-10609. And the water available would be as determined by Water District 01. So then of the water available, you'll see we go into the subparts A. So when the board's recharge average is 250,000 acre feet or less, the board may divert 100% of the water available under those two rights. That the board may also divert 100% if the Department of Water Resources adopts a groundwater management plan or issues any other order requiring groundwater users to conserve more groundwater than was agreed to in the 2024 stipulated mitigation plan. So under those two circumstances, the board would be able to divert 100% of the water available. In subparagraph B, when the board's recharge average exceeds 250,000 acre feet, but is less than 350,000 acre feet, then from December 1st to February 15th, the board would divert 50% of the water available or 200 CFS, whichever is greater. Then when the average is 350,000 acre feet or more, then from December 1st to March 1st, the board would divert only 40% of the water available. And then under paragraph D, when the average exceeds 355,000 acre feet for 3 consecutive years, then from the period of November 1st to April 1st, the board would divert 40% of the water available. Paragraph 5 is simply a statement that the board and Idaho Power Company will get benefits from this agreement, and that if for some reason either party feels that benefits are not being met, then they agree to meet and confer with the other party to see if any modifications need to be made to the agreement. Paragraph 6, Idaho Power Company is agreeing to continue the Upper Snake cloud seeding program during the term of the agreement, so long as it's authorized and funded, of course. And then paragraph 7, modification of the agreement. The agreement can be modified or terminated with written consent of both parties, and any negotiations or extensions of the agreement would be subject to the open public meeting law and would be presented in a public forum. I'm not going to go through paragraphs 8 through the end. Much of that is legalese that probably isn't as interesting for the discussion today, but certainly take a look at all of that as well. So this is the agreement that councils for Idaho Power Company and the board have produced and come up with, and it's presented today for your consideration and discussion and edits. So I think with that, that's all I have.
Okay, committee members, any comments or suggestions?
Mr. Chair, this is Joanne Cole-Hansen. We've been working on this agreement for quite some time. I think this is a good agreement, and I would like to make a motion that we move this agreement forward to the full board for adoption.
I'll second that.
Okay,
Ryan.
it's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion from committee members? Do any non-committee members of the board have any comments?
Mr. Chairman, before you, or before the committee votes, you may want to see the analysis by
Yeah,
David Hokema.
that was, I wanted to see what, if anybody had any comments about what Ann has just presented. And then I think it would be appropriate to hold the vote on this motion until after we see these two different capacity analysis presentations. And then, and then we can talk about it some more.
Mr. Chairman, I have a couple of hopefully quick questions.
Go ahead.
Jennifer, could you page down to keep going. Up,
Section,
4B.
okay.
Yeah, no, sorry, 4A12. Can, I'm not sure I understand the reasoning behind this one. Can somebody explain that to me?
As I recall, this was based on input that we received from the Idaho Groundwater Appropriators. Subparagraph II is, and the A is just simply if we are under 250,000 acre feet on our 15-year rolling average, we would divert 100% of the available water for recharge.
Right, I got that. I was just looking at two little eyes.
Yeah, two little eyes. That was input from the groundwater users who felt like if there was a groundwater management plan adopted or any other directive from the department that required the groundwater users to cut back more, that we should probably not be uh, bypassing any water that could be recharged if the aquifer was in that condition, I
Okay.
suppose.
I figured that's where it came from, but I wasn't certain. Then could you page down to number 6 on the cloud seeding? Is number 6 intended to memorialize the status quo in the Upper Snake cloud seeding program?
Mr. Chairman, looks like Scott Pugrid with Idaho Power would like to address that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Board Member Barker, both of the provisions that you've identified were negotiated in a separate agreement that's identified in the last whereas or the last background recital that Idaho Power entered into a separate Milner bypass agreement with the Idaho Groundwater Appropriators on March 15th of 2025. These are terms that Idaho Power and IGWA negotiated and that would become a part of the board's agreement not to divert with Idaho Power. So that's the impetus of both of those. With respect to the cloud seeding provision, I think that yes, status quo is what we were attempting to capture in number 6.
Thank you, Scott. I appreciate that. I don't have anything further, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay. All right. There being no further comment at this time, why don't we have the presentation on the capacity analysis, Mr. Patton?
Okay, first we'll hear from David Hokema from the department as he's worked through this capacity analysis on behalf of the board.
Welcome, David.
Thank you. Let me share my screen here just a minute. Okay, members, chairman and members of the board. The question I was tasked with addressing is the 350,000 acre feet of recharge achievable under the proposed conditions of the agreement? And I'm just looking at those 4 conditions that Jennifer covered earlier. Or sorry, Ann covered earlier. Okay, the question: can the Idaho Water Resource Board reach a 15-year average annual recharge target of 350,000 given an agreement with Idaho Power Company not to divert some of the flow available at Milner Dam? And so the why here is the ESPA started declining around 1950, and an agreement between groundwater pumpers and surface water users changed the trajectory of the ESPA. That agreement occurred in 2014, which appears to have stabilized the aquifer. Due to rearrangements in 2024, there's a new agreement targeting 350,000 acre feet. And so that's what we're addressing. Here's the history of the aquifer. We've been over this before with the board, I think, but that last bump is not due to any kind of pluvial activity. The previous bumps in the aquifer on its decline, it would go up in each of those bumps when we had a pluvial period. And then when we had normal climate conditions, the aquifer would decline. And that last little bump after the 2014 agreement is due almost entirely to aquifer recharge and groundwater cutbacks. Alex Moody with the department has presented this graphic showing what the bump would have looked like without those activities, which is that bottom green line. It would have barely risen. And then the components to it are shown in the other lines. If we look at this graphic here, it shows the variability of climate and the change in aquifer volume due to shifts in climate. So the gray triangles there represent the period when the aquifer was rising, and the black dots represent the period from 1980 to 2010 as the aquifer was in decline. We do have a number of years that were extremely pluvial in the early 80s and late 90s that are not in the typical range of what we see in the Snake River Basin. But generally, if you look at the black component, you'll see the average is roughly negative 600 millimeters here on the potential water deficit. And at that level, the aquifer should be declining. This was prior to the 2014 agreement. And so if you model that and compare it to what the aquifer model said, it says exactly the same thing, that we have about 200 million acre feet as of 2023 in the aquifer that won't have been there. So we're trying to protect that. That's the why. So some of the constraints on this analysis is it uses historic climate and management conditions. So we're going back and we're looking at what water was available historically, and assuming management conditions under the current scenario. We haven't tried to guess what management changes will occur into the future. Analysis uses current recharge program capacity, and there's 2 different levels of capacity we'll talk about. One is pre-2024 and then post-2024. There were some changes due to the 2024 agreement that makes it more likely to get private recharge in the upper Snake River Basin rather than board recharge. And so that may limit our capacity in the future. And so in this analysis, we go through both a pre and post 2024 capacity analysis for the upper basin. The proposed agreement not to divert is based on the water year, and a rolling average will start in 2016. That's not part of this analysis. This analysis starts in 1980 and goes forward. And then just to reemphasize, Idaho Water Resource Board Upper Valley recharge capacity was reduced due to in 2024 due to increased private recharge. So we'll have to see what happens in the future, but things can change. And so part of this, in looking at this analysis, is it's under the current conditions, but conditions do change. So we just have to be aware of that going forward. These are the 4 conditions that, I'll just represent it this way, that, limit when we would recharge or not recharge the board under this agreement. So if we're below 250,000 in our 15-year rolling average, the board would be diverting everything to aquifer recharge. If we're above 250,000 and below 350,000, then 50% of the flow between December 1st and February 15 would be bypassed for use downstream. If we get above 350,000 and below 355,000, 40% of the flow from December 1st to March 1st, this condition almost never comes into play because there's only a 5,000 acre foot difference in that rolling average. It does in the final year of analysis, but you won't hit that condition very often. And then if you're above 355,000, 40% of the flow would be diverted for aquifer recharge, and the remaining 60% would be sent downstream between November 1st and April 1st. So if you take a year, this is just an example year of 1980. If we look at the historic flow past Milner, this is flow that would have been available for recharge. And under these different conditions, we reduce how much is available for recharge. So under condition 1, everything's available. Under condition 2, we take out, starting in December, it's this dark blue line, we're letting pass 50% until we get to February 15. Then under condition 3, we bypass 60%, and that ends on March 1st. And then if we exceed 355,000 acre feet, the bypass begins on November 1st and ends on April 1st. So we'll just step through a few of these. I'm not going to go through every year. I have every year in the slide deck. If you're curious, you can look at them. But there will be 2 slides on every one of these years. On the left is conditions for recharge, given this under historic conditions pre-2024. I didn't want to include 3 slides because we could do a post-2024, but current capacity. I didn't do that, but we will show that analysis at the end. So on the left, you have conditions pre-2024 with no bypass agreement. Then on the right, you have the conditions in the upper valley post-2024 and the conditions of this agreement in place. So you have reduced recharge availability in the upper valley. And we'll compare those 2 and just kind of step through the analysis. So assuming in 1980, we start out with 250,000 acre feet for our 15-year rolling average, we're going to assume at 250,000 acre feet, we don't bypass anything. And we're in condition 1. And so this is just looking at that difference in capacity due to the change in 2024. You'll notice that there's a little less recharge available in the upper valley. Can you see my mouse over there? You can. Okay. A little bit of reduced recharge in the upper valley.
Hey, David, I'm going to interrupt you. What's the assumption that you would reduce recharge post 2024? Is that a capacity constraint or a water supply constraint?
It's a restraint because in 2024, more of the recharge capacity went to private recharge rather than board recharge. And we're assuming that's going to go forward, but we do an analysis also where we look at it post 2024.
It's a capacity constraint, not a water supply constraint.
Yeah, it's a capacity constraint.
Okay.
Correct.
All right. Thank you.
And so under these conditions, 373,000 acre feet could have been diverted. But with the limitations in the upper valley, it's 352,000 acre feet and change. And so as we step through, now we're in condition 2. So on the left, the agreement is kicked in where we're bypassing, on the left, there's no reduction in recharge, but on the right, on December 1st, you can see the 50% of bypass starts to occur. There's 3,000 CFS available, and we're reducing that down to 1,500 CFS roughly as we go through that period. And then it ends on March 15. And then after that, the two analyses are identical, other than the reduced recharge capacity in the upper valley. And the difference is 624,000 versus 556,000 acre feet of recharge. And then here's our 15-year rolling average at just over 250. And then our rolling average of 258. And so as you step through, you can see the impacts. We're still in condition 2 here in 82. 83, the only limitation in recharge is right at the corner here, because the amount of flow bypassing is so great, or the amount of flood control going on is so great that it far exceeds our capacity for recharge. So there's only a very small limitation right in the corner there. Again, same thing in 1984, a very limited reduction here as we enter into condition 4. We're now bypassing 60% of the flow, just a little bit of reduction right at the tail end. But when we're looking at numbers, we're looking at 1.2 million acre feet of recharge versus 975,000 acre feet of recharge. Then we stay in condition 4. You can just look at these different conditions. You can see the impacts. And then when we get into drought years, this is the 88 to 93 drought. We're in condition 4. So instead of having 280,000 acre feet for recharge, we have 162,000 acre feet of recharge. And the only recharge is available in the lower valley. We stay in condition 4. You'll notice our rolling average is at 617 without these conditions in place for bypass, and it's 518,000 with these conditions in place. So you can kind of keep an eye on those numbers. We're bringing that down now, gradually dropping the 15-year rolling average as we go through these drought years, getting it back down toward 350,000. And then we hit 1994 where there was some flood control going on. Not a whole lot, but the reduction is fairly significant. We go from 578,000 acre feet of recharge to 310, but that's helping bring us down toward that 350, whereas over here we're at 617,000 acre feet of capacity. Then we go into 1995 and we're going to hit another pluvial period. And you'll notice the recharge, you can hit a pluvial year and there's just a little bit of flood control at the tail end of the season. It's usually the year after those pluvial conditions where you have the greatest opportunity for recharge. So if you look at 1996, because they ended with a full reservoirs in 1995, this is the type of year where we have maximum recharge. And so in this case, you'd have 1 million acre feet of recharge versus 800,000 acre feet of recharge with some limitations. And then as you continue through to 1997, you can see these are very pluvial. The rolling average is fairly high, but on the right, it's about 150,000, 200,000 lower. 2000, and then we go back into a drought period. Now this drought period is going to be long enough that by the time we get through this drought period, that we're going to actually go below the 250,000 because we're losing those pluvial years of the early 90s. But if you look at this again, we're bringing the numbers down. We're approaching the 350, but it takes us quite a while. 2008, 2009, 2010. We're still in condition 4 all the way through here. 2011, 2012, those are decent years. Then we go back into another drought year. We're at 372,000 on the right, 550,000 on the left. And then here's where we're going to start to see the drop. We get to 307,000, we're in condition 2 because we dropped below the 350. And we're now down to 250. So that drop is pretty dramatic now that we're out of that 15-year average. And we're now down to 230,000 acre feet. This is 2016, so there's no bypass. We're in condition number 1. And then 2017, even though that's a pluvial year, the Snowmageddon year, no bypass, because we're trying to get that number back up to 350. And then in 2018, we come back into condition 2 on the right. And that limits us by about 100,000 acre feet. And we're now approaching the 350, so we're still at the 2, condition 2 in 2020, 2021. We've now passed the 350 and we're back into condition 4, 2022, 2023, 2024. And here we end at just slightly below 350,000. So if we look at this graph, we have the blue line represents without these conditions of the agreement in place. We stay above the 350,000 the entire time, but for much of that period, we're above 600,000 acre feet of recharge on our rolling average. But what we see is with this condition in place, it draws the number back down toward 350 until we have enough pluvial years in a row, it drops it below. And then we come back up, and right now we would be sitting right at 350,000. And the last few years have been somewhat of since 2018 are fairly normal climatically. Although this period is altogether drier from 2000 to 2024, it's drier than is typical climatically. But how the climate influences us has a lot to depend on how we'll do going forward. And then if you look at that gray line here, that represents if we had the free 2024 recharge availability in the upper valley for the board. The orange line there is the current recharge available to the board. So it doesn't mean that recharge isn't occurring. It's just it's not board recharge, allowing us to hit that 350,000 acre foot level. And so it's good to remember that under historic conditions, the 15-year rolling average was mostly above 350,000. However, if we were to start this agreement and we were to go into 1930 type of climate, it might take us a decade or two to get up to the 350,000, and that's mainly a climatic issue. If we were in a pluvial situation like the 1970s, we could quickly exceed the 350,000 like we saw under the 80s scenario. So it generally looks like we're going to be in that ballpark of 350,000, but to get there, it depends a lot on how fast we get there. Will depend a lot on the climate.
Okay, thank you, David. Committee members, do you have questions for David?
Mr. Chairman, Brian,
Yeah.
I know, the rolling average where we've got the recharge capacity now, but we didn't have 15 years ago, and we've had pretty good capacity for 5 or 10 years. So are you making that average assuming that we would have had capacity in those earlier years, or you just start from 2017 and go forward till we get to 15 years?
In this analysis in 1980, we assume we have all of the current capacity, and then we run to look forward how these different agreements would impact hitting that 350,000. So we definitely have the capacity to hit 350, and without any agreement with Idaho Power to bypass flow, historically we would have been above 350 the whole period. And so if we were to implement this agreement, we would mostly stay above the 350 under the historic period, with one period where we dip below momentarily. That's what we see in this analysis. If we were to have a long drought period like in the 1930s, we could definitely go below no matter what, the conditions are, we could go below the 350 or the 250, but with this agreement in place, whenever we're below 250, we just recharge everything paid.
And just to follow up quick, Mr. Chairman,
Sure.
so David, if we continue to increase capacity, which we're trying to put more sites online all the time, does that make it easier to stay above the 350, or have you already calculated that into the?
No, this is based on the current capacity. And so if you have more capacity in the future, it's like we see in this line, if we were to regain some of that capacity, we would follow the gray line instead of the orange line.
Thank you.
Committee members, any other questions or comments? Other board members? Okay,
Mr. Chairman, Pat McMahon.
yes, go ahead, Pat.
I understand that the private recharge isn't credited to the board recharge. David, do you have any feel on how that's going to affect the rolling average?
It won't affect the rolling average because the rolling average is based only on Idaho Water Resource Board recharge. My understanding is that a lot of the private recharge is being done to offset impacts from groundwater pumping. So, as far as the aquifer goes, hopefully that's a wash. The recharge program for the board is to try to make up, a good portion of the recharge that's not being mitigated by groundwater cutbacks.
Thank you, sir.
David, this is Jeff. Just to ask Brian's question in a different way, having this analysis in hand, if we were to ask you to go back and tell us how much more capacity we needed so that we could stay above 350 without dipping below, is that something that you could at least give us a back of the envelope guesstimate to?
To do that, you couldn't have this agreement
Well,
because we could. You'd have to have a lot of capacity to avoid dropping below that during the 15-year period. You'd have to have a ton of capacity. And this is really limiting your capacity in the lower valley more than in the upper valley. So you'd have to increase your capacity in the lower valley. And I mean, we could look at the potential for that, but I don't think you're going to avoid going below the 350 for, a period of time if you have 15 drier than normal years.
okay. Okay, all right. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Patton, next item would be Idaho Power's analysis. Are they prepared for that?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Jennifer Chuhachian with Idaho Power will present that, along with some help from Cresta Davison.
Welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me try to share my screen here. Right, Madam Chair, members of the committee, my name is Jen Chuhajian. I'm a senior engineer in the Operations Hydrology Group at Idaho Power. My role in the group is to maintain and develop the planning model that we keep in-house and then also apply it to studies such as these. I'm trying to advance, sorry. So I wanted to start giving some background on the Upper Snake Planning Model. It's been in existence since the 1970s in various forms. IDWR first developed it, and Fortran, the SRPM model. Back then, it's been translated many times to different software packages. The most recent one is a Riverware version. It's the one that we use today. Riverware is a river and reservoir operations modeling software. Our version of it was originally developed by the Bureau of Reclamation. They present conditioned it as part of their modified flow study in 2020. And then we have been using it for our integrated resource plan analysis since 2020, and we have added aquifer recharge to the program and also enhanced the calibration through our mid-snake projects. And we've worked with IDWR, and we continue to work with them to improve and modernize the model. I wanted to use this figure to help illustrate the spatial scope of the model. It covers the entire river basin above Brownlee Reservoir. It simulates reservoir operations upstream, also demands, diversions, and returns. It also has managed aquifer recharge, as I mentioned, and accounts for groundwater pumping and the water balance. It's an important thing to point out about the models that it's present conditioned. This is what sets it apart from a historical analysis. What that means is that the input hydrology and the water management in the model have been calibrated to represent current system conditions. That includes calibrating the groundwater interactions, irrigation demands, water management practices, including managed aquifer recharge, and then also reservoir operations targets. Those targets have changed since the 1980s, and so we want to have them aligned with current practices. And then why do we do this? It lets us leverage a wide range of hydrologic conditions and then evaluate how it would move through the system of today. And that lets us ask forward-looking questions like the ones I'm gonna ask today. One being, can the board achieve a long-term natural flow recharge average of 350,000 acre feet? And then layering on the question, does the agreement not to divert support the board's ability to achieve that target? So here's an example of how the model calculates recharge diversions. There is a max capacity line shown in orange. We got this from IDWR. This is for the lower valley in the example I'm showing. There's also an uptime adjusted capacity also from IDWR that accounts for maintenance and other seasonal limitations. You can see the capacity varies across the year. And then here I've layered on natural flow available for recharge that the model calculates at each time step. The model then compares that blue line to the dark orange line and computes the recharge diversion for the lower valley. You can see from November 1st through January 1st, recharge was natural flow limited. And then from January 1st to June, end of June, it shifts to capacity limited. This is the logic that we have implemented in the model for the agreement. It's shown here kind of a flip of what you've seen in the legalese. I'm showing it in terms of the amount of flow that passes Milner rather than the percent that goes to board recharge. And then the model's also configured to make sure the first 200 CFS goes to board recharge before going to this bypass flow. So now I'll shift into our results where we found the agreement not to divert does support the board's 350,000 acre foot target. Without the agreement, the recharge average stays well above the 350 CAF target, and with the agreement, it brings it down closer. So here's that question one. So not taking into account the agreement yet, just can the board achieve a long-term natural flow recharge average of 350,000 acre feet? Here I'm showing annual recharge volumes by the board in the blue lines from 1980 to 2018, along with a 350,000 acre foot dashed line there for reference. And then here we've initialized that 15-year rolling average to what we saw in 2025. And then as you can see, that average quickly escalates through the 80s and then stays above the 350,000 acre foot line for the remainder of the period. That gives us a period average from 1980 to 2018 of 512,000 acre feet per year of recharge. But these were really wet years, as David pointed out. So we also wanted to ask the question again, but this time starting the model with dry years, we used the early 2000s, asked the same question, and got essentially the same answer. The board's still able to meet or exceed the 350,000 acre foot target when water supply conditions improve. So now moving on to question 2, does the agreement not to divert support the board's ability to achieve or maintain 350 calf? Keeping with that dry scenario to stress test the terms of the agreement, you'll see the orange plot here again. The dark orange bars are the same as before. That's the no agreement. I've added with agreement in light orange, and also the dashed line is the rolling average for the with agreement. So in both cases, the board is still able to meet or exceed the 350 calf. And then I wanted to point out these 3 years here, 2004 through 2006. David spoke a bit about this. This is when that first term is in place, condition A, I believe it is, where there's no winter flow passing Milner. The 15-year rolling average has slightly dipped below 250. For the 2001 through 2018 period average without the agreement, it equates to 444,000 acre feet of recharge each year, and with the agreement, 386,000 acre feet of recharge over that period. So then wrapping up, as I said previously, the agreement does support the board's ability to achieve 350,000 acre feet. With the agreement, it stays well above the 350,000 acre foot target. And then did I say that backwards? Without the agreement, it stays well above. With the agreement, it does bring it down closer. And then some final points. We wanted to note that the analysis is likely conservative. It hasn't been present condition for cloud seeding specifically. So cloud seeding is not included in most of the hydrologic years. And then also noted that the analysis showed the board recharge diversions do experience capacity limited conditions, and additional recharge capacity would improve the board's ability to leverage the high flow periods and further support achieving and maintaining a long-term recharge average of 350,000 acre feet. And that's all I had. If there are any questions.
Okay, committee members, do you have any questions for Jennifer?
Mr. Chairman, Brian,
Go ahead.
Jennifer, can you go back to that bar chart for a minute, the last one you had? Now, you said there was no bypass from 2002 to 2006?
2004 through 2006. I should have paused on that.
What was the reason for that? I don't remember the no bypass years.
Yeah, so this is a planning model analysis, so it's not a historical analysis. So this is if in the future we had conditions like 2004 through 2006, and if you look, I don't know if I have a pointer. So these lines, the 15-year rolling average dips slightly, or they touch the 250,000 acre foot line, and that triggers that condition in the agreement where there's no winter flow past Milner. So that's why with and without the agreement, those bars are identical.
I understand that.
Okay,
I didn't realize it was hypothetical. I didn't
Yeah.
remember there being zero flow at Milner and
gotcha.
Milner, so.
Thank
See
you
it
for
now.
the
Thank you.
question. Yes.
Hey, Jennifer, while you have that graph up there, I'm just looking at the delta between 350 from years 2001 through looks like 2011 or 12 is when the with recharge average hits 350, and then I'm looking at the balance of the years when it is at 350 or above. And the visual math that I'm assuming here, I don't know how you get to 386,000 with the agreement.
The 386,000 is the average of the bars.
Okay,
So
but
it ends up,
you've got. I'm just looking at what you're indicating the average for that particular year is, and from 2001 to 2018, we don't get to 350 till 2012. Then we stay at 350 or above through 2018. But there's a lot more daylight below the 350 line than there is above the 350 line on the first 2/3 of your graph. So I'm struggling with how that number equates to 386.
I can certainly go back and check my math.
I mean, you see what I'm looking at there?
Yeah, I think, so are we on the same page that these lines are the 15-year rolling average, and they eventually make it up to 350. The average I'm showing here is, if you ignore the lines on the plot, it's the average of all these bars. And I see what you're saying, that there's more daylight below the 350, but I'm squinting without having my Excel sheet in front of me. There's also quite a bit above the 350.
Well, yeah, but does that take into account that's based on our capacity. The bar chart of this is based on our capacity to do recharge.
The bar is the recharge diversion, and the dark orange is without the agreement, and the light orange is with the agreement.
Okay. So,
Mr. Chair,
yeah,
this is Joanne. Maybe I can clarify, or I have a question that may lead to clarification.
okay.
There's 18 years depicted on this graph. Are the first three dropped off to come up with the 15-year rolling average?
The
yeah.
rolling average is initialized to 2025. So it's,
Okay, I think you're right, Joanne. I think if you take 3 of those low years off and just use the last 15 years, yeah. But I'm still struggling with getting it much above 350, Joanne.
Really, you would start at 2004 to do the 15-year.
Yeah, if I measure that area below the 350 baseline from 2004 through 2011. And then I measure the area above the baseline from 2011 through 2018.
I think I may have confused the message here by putting this period average
Yeah.
on here. I thought it was interesting, but the 15-year average, the way it's set up in the model, in 2001, since there aren't 15 years in the model run before 2001, it's gonna assume 2025 14 times.
Oh, okay.
And then it moves forward until there are 15 years, and then it computes that way. Does that
Okay,
make-
that helps.
Does that answer the question?
Yeah, okay. If you're using 14 2000 years and 1 2001, then yeah. Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. All right. That would explain why the graph is lower. Thank you.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you for the question, Mr.
Committee
Chairman.
members, do you have any other questions? Other board members? Okay, Mr. Patton, you indicated that Cresta Davis wanted to put her fingerprints on this presentation. Is that correct?
Only if needed, Mr. Chairman. It looks like she doesn't need to,
Oh, okay. All right.
unless you have questions of her.
I don't. Do other committee members or board members have any questions for Cresta? Okay, thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Cresta.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Patton, we've had these two analyses presented to us. We've been taking action on the motion from agenda item 2. Also, I believe TJ Budge is online, as IGWA is a party to a settlement with Idaho Power that's reflected in this not to divert agreement. I wonder if Mr. Budge has any comments on behalf of IGWA.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is TJ Budge. I'm General Counsel for Idaho Groundwater Appropriators. First, thank you for letting me comment remotely. I really appreciate being able to do that. And also, thank you to the board staff and board members who have worked on this. I know a lot of effort has gone into this agreement, and I appreciate it. I also appreciate the presentations that were given today by David and Idaho Power. And I appreciate the analysis that went into evaluating the effects of the agreement and giving us some confidence that the board can achieve its 350,000 acre feet target. I do have a few comments, but first I wanted to ask if it would be possible to get a copy of the agreement to review before the board meeting on Friday. I didn't see it in the meeting materials for this meeting.
Where are we at with that, Ann or Brian?
Yeah, it will be posted. I'm being told it's posted now, but it will be posted shortly after the meeting's done.
Thanks, Brian. And will that be in the meeting packet for Friday? Is that where that would be posted?
It'll probably be in the meeting packet for today as well as in the meeting packet for Friday.
Okay, I can find it there. Thank you. Yeah, so I won't take too much time. As the board, I think, knows, IGWA's always had a little consternation with the bypass agreement for various reasons. And, part of it is that legally we, fought so hard to preserve the Milner zero flow policy and the Two Rivers Doctrine that there's a feeling that, we need to use all the water above Milner that we can. That being said, I recognize and appreciate that there are other public interests out there besides the groundwater irrigators. And we appreciate that the board is attempting to balance those interests by allowing the bypass. And we understand that and respect that effort the board is undertaking. Our concern really boils down to this. Idaho Power's presentation showed that because of the bypass agreement, over the long term, they predict that there'll be on average 58,000 acre feet less recharge because of that. And what we don't want to have happen is that reduction in recharge to come back and bite us in some other way. And the two examples that are most prominent and we've discussed are the Swan Falls agreement. So by bypassing the recharge and foregoing that, there will be a small reduction in spring flows in the Thousand Springs area. And that reduction in flow will come during the Swan Falls low flow periods whereby the bypass doesn't. So there is a slightly increased risk of curtailment under the Swan Falls agreement. And then also the foregone recharge has an impact on aquifer levels in the aquifer. And we don't want to be in a position where the Department of Water Resources is pursuing greater curtailment of groundwater use because of groundwater levels. And those were the concerns that IGWA raised with the board a year ago and that we discussed with Idaho Power. And we identified some solutions working cooperatively with Idaho Power to address those concerns last year. And I think those solutions were incorporated into the agreement that was present today. But I'm not certain on a few of them. So I appreciate the chance just to ask a few questions. I'll just briefly go through the concepts that IGWA and Idaho Power discussed earlier this year in their agreement, discussed and agreed to. And one of them is the limitations on the bypass flow based on the board's average recharge numbers, the 250, 300, and 355. And that was discussed today. That's included in this present agreement, and I appreciate that. I did have one question about the different averaging periods used in that that kind of tiered framework. As I understood it during the presentation, the average is generally based on a 15-year average. So the 250 or below, or 250 to 350, that's based on a 15-year average. And then once you get to the 355 threshold, it's based on a 3-year average. And the question I have is, what happens if your 15-year average is, less than 350 or less than 250 potentially, but your 3-year average is above 355? Does that create a maybe a conflict within the terms of the agreement as to, what you do, the next year.
TJ, this is Jeff. As I understand the agreement and what we've been talking about, the 15-year average has to remain above 355 for 3 consecutive years for that more liberal bypass to occur. If at any time the 15-year average drops below 355, even for 1 year, then you would have to reset that and start over again to get 3 consecutive years. And somebody correct me if that's not the way the agreement's written. I
That
think
makes-
that's how it is, Jay. Does that help?
Yeah, that totally helps. And I apologize. I only had a moment to look at that provision as Ann was going, or Jennifer, I'm not sure who was doing that presentation, as they were going through it. So that makes sense, and I appreciate that clarification. The other one of the other terms that IGWA and Idaho Power agreed to was that if the Department of Water Resources imposes additional groundwater conservation obligations, meaning they're requiring more groundwater curtailment than is currently required under the 2024 stipulated mitigation plan, then the board could recharge the 100% of the available flow. I saw that was included in this present agreement, and I appreciate that. There was another provision that I don't know if that's included in the current agreement or not, and it was that if there is a breach of the Swan Falls minimums, the bypass water would be credited towards that breach up to a certain amount. I think it was 50,000 acre feet. And the purpose of that was to avoid being in a position where there's a breach of the Swan Falls minimums, and then people are really upset that the bypass has been happening. Does the current agreement have that type of provision?
TJ, I don't believe it does, but that's an agreement between IGWA and Idaho Power, and I don't think the water board can become a party to that agreement because the minimums at the Murphy gauge or at Swan Falls are minimum stream flow water rights that the board has to maintain. So that's the hurdle with that problem. I don't think we can agree to that. I mean, the credit's there, but I don't know how we utilize the credit, TJ.
Yeah, so I do recognize that the agreement that IGWA signed with Idaho Power is just between those two parties, and the board's not bound by it. So I didn't mean to infer that. I would suggest that the board should consider that. The board does have a duty under the state water plan to manage water supplies to maintain the Swan Falls minimums, and by bypassing water, that is contrary to that state water plan duty if a breach occurs. And I just don't think the board or Idaho Power or anybody else wants to find themselves in a position where an unforeseen breach happens, and then the public finds out that the board was bypassing water, and it just creates a headache. So even though the board's not bound by the agreement with IGWA, I would encourage the board to consider whether that would be an appropriate provision for its agreement with Idaho Power. And then there was also a potential a provision that acknowledged that nothing in the bypass agreement would impair the Two Rivers Doctrine or the Milner Zero Flow Policy, and there were a few other acknowledgments that we felt were important to preserve the sanctity of those laws. And I don't know if those are in the board's agreement or not either.
I can tell you they're probably not. We've been advised that this agreement not to divert, as it is currently written, does not impact the zero flow at Milner policy.
And I understand, I think I understand that probably the basis for that advice. It is a debatable an issue, and I guess I don't see a harm in including a recognition by both parties that nothing in this agreement will impair Milner Zero Flow or the Tours Doctrine. So I would just offer that also as a suggestion to consider including in this agreement. And it seems like something that both parties would be supportive of. But those were just the other questions I had. And like I started with, I appreciate the effort put in by the board. I appreciate the presentations given today. I appreciate that the board's trying to balance different interests. And we just want to ensure that this agreement is implemented in a way that we don't find ourselves experiencing unintended consequences down the road. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, TJ. Okay, based on the comments from TJ, this agreement was put together by our legal counsel. Do either of the attorneys have any comment or anything they would like to add at this time? I'll maybe start with Ann.
No, I don't have anything to add. Thanks.
Okay. Scott, do you have anything from Idaho Power?
Nothing specific, Mr. Chairman. I just want to thank the board and Ann for working with Idaho Power through this process. It's been a long one.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Patton, I believe that brings us back to the motion that we're holding on whether or the motion is to recommend this agreement to not divert to the full board for their consideration at their next board meeting.
That's correct, Mr. Chairman. You have a motion by Joanne Cole-Hansen and a second by Brian Olmstead on the table.
Okay, all right. Committee members, are there any discussion or comments you wish to make before we proceed to vote? Okay, I will call for a vote on the motion. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? Okay, I have one aye vote from Joanne. I'm
Brian
Dean,
voted aye, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, okay. Brian's an aye. Dean, Dean is on mute.
Yeah, I'm
Okay. Okay. All
I'm a
right.
yes.
Okay. All right. It was just kind of quiet there for a minute. I want to make sure everybody had a chance to voice their vote. Okay. The motion carries. We will recommend this to the full board for their consideration. Okay. Mr. Patton, I have other items. Is there anything else that staff wishes to bring up at this time?
Not from staff, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, committee members, do any of you have anything that you need to bring up before we adjourn this meeting?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, I'm not hearing anything. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, any opposed? Motion carries. We're adjourned. And I believe that we have another meeting that will probably tee up in 5 minutes.
5 minutes.
Okay.
Bill
All right.
Finance Committee.
Okay. See you in a bit. Thank you all.
Is it a different?